Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me. As always, week 2 of the college football season is in the books. Week 1 of the NFL season concludes tonight with the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. Here at Saturday to Sunday, we will once again cover things wire to wire from everything that happened on Saturday and all of the relevant rookie discussions from Sunday as well. We'll conclude with a quick Dynasty fantasy report for your Dynasty players out there from after what we saw in week 1, any takes we might have in terms of a stock up and a stock down. But let's get right into it with the 2026 NFL draft report for week 2 of the college football season. Now, I will say we had an unbelievable week 1 in terms of matchups that will really be discussed throughout the year, throughout the pre-draft process in terms of evaluating top-level prospects against really good other teams. This week, there was not a lot on the docket in terms of high-caliber matchups between teams, not a lot of top 25 matchups, not a lot of intriguing matchups for the top prospects as well. So not nearly as much to discuss as last week. So definitely we'll spend a little bit more time talking Sunday, rookie debuts, a lot to digest from that as well. But let's get right into it. I want to start the quarterback position. A lot of top prospects struggled last week. They had a chance to redeem themselves this week. Most of their teams were facing far inferior competition, and most of them lived up to the hype for this week and got back on track of what we expected. Right at the top, Arch Manning this week against San Jose State. There was a 5-minute stretch or so in the game where he had 4 touchdowns. It might have even been like a 3-minute stretch of clock time where he threw for 4 touchdowns. He was 19 of 30 for 296 yards and 4 touchdowns. Also added a rushing touchdown on the ground. Listen, a performance this week against San Jose State does not mitigate or change the narrative of what we saw week 1 against Ohio State. It's going to take a while for people to forget that performance from Arch Manning. It's going to have to be against a big-time team or down the line, maybe a rematch against Ohio State. But let's not lose sight of the fact that Arch Manning checks off every toolbox that you're looking for in a quarterback prospect. So I understand that Ohio State game was bad. But I said it last week. I wasn't changing my narrative on the tools and what he offered, the physical attributes that he offered. It was nice to see him get back on track, get a little confident, and it'll be interesting to see when Texas plays the next big game they have on their schedule after, putting up some statistics, get into a little bit of a groove. Do we see a different performance in the next big game that Arch Manning gets an opportunity to? Another quarterback that struggled week 1 was Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana. This week, Indiana rolled. Obviously, again, who they're playing, not much competition, but it was nice to see Mendoza get back on track. 4 passing touchdowns this week. Looked much more like that intriguing toolsy prospect that I was talking about on the the preseason quarterback preview show. Mendoza is still a guy who I think will intrigue a lot of NFL teams, has the size, has the prototype, has athleticism, a lot to like about Mendoza's raw physical traits. Another guy who struggled last week, and that was in that big LSU Clemson game, was Cade Klubnik. Now, Clemson was a 30-point favorite over Troy this week. The first half of that game, Clemson really struggled. They did come back in the second half and win comfortably by like 11 or 14 points. Klubnik, 18 of 24, 2 touchdowns for 196 yards. We saw Mendoza and Arch Manning go out there and make it look super easy. It was not that easy for Clemson this week. It's really going to be interesting to kind of see how this Clemson team kind of comes together and how Klubnik does, because there was a lot of people, a bunch of the ESPN draft analysts had Klubnik as their number 1 quarterback. Todd McShay had Klubnik really high in his quarterback rankings as well. First 2 weeks of the season, we have not seen the best out of Cade Klubnik. Interested to kind of see next time Clemson gets a big game, do we start to see that guy who can be a dual threat and carry a team, or do we see some of these inconsistencies still rear its head? Next up, 2 quarterbacks I talked about last week, 2 quarterbacks that in the show in August when we were previewing the college football season, I had a late round 1 to early round 2 grade. I said they could move their way into round 1. They could fall a little bit. Both of them came out of the gates red hot last week. I'm talking about John Mateer out of Oklahoma and Sam Levitt out of Arizona State. Well, this week, Mateer went up against Oklahoma, 21 of 34, 270 yards and a touchdown, had 74 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. It was a really solid performance from John Mateer. So 2 weeks now in a row, he's building a little bit of a crescendo. And he's got the traits that are going to intrigue NFL teams. He's got the dual right. He's got the mobility. There's a lot to like about John Mateer's game. He is off to a good start to solidify his status as a guy who could go round 1 or early round 2 in the 2026 NFL draft. Last week, Sam Leavitt, unbelievable game for Arizona State. Really struggled this week against Mississippi State. 10 of 22, 82 yards only passing, and 2 interceptions. So it was a really poor game from Sam Leavitt. And I think we again, need to put everything into perspective. There is going to be ups and downs. You got to ride the momentum with these quarterbacks. They're going to look good one week. They're going to struggle the next week. We are in a microwave type society where we want instant reactions after every game, after every week. The reason why I'm not going to really even look at my rankings too much over the first month here in September is I kind of need to let the process kind of ride itself out a little bit before I make drastic changes. Because after week 1, Arch looked terrible. Mendoza looked terrible. Leavitt looked unbelievable. But I wasn't going to go change rankings after I watched their film from last year off of one game. Now, we saw Leavitt come back this week and really, really struggle. So when you look at the 2-game sample for this year, Leavitt's performance this week was worse or poorer than any performance we saw from the top quarterbacks last week. And that includes Arch, and that includes Mendoza and Klubnik, all those guys who struggled in week 1. Leavitt's performance this week was far worse than those. So you kind of got to take the big picture. And I think that's what I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on this year, of not to drastically start changing draft projections and rankings after one game or after one bad performance or off of one good performance. Kind of let a little bit more of the body of work talk about the performance and then kind of let itself play itself out. Do we see multiple poor games in a row from Leavitt? Was it just one? Do we see Arch struggle in another second big game when that game arises? And we kind of assess that, okay, we haven't seen the improvement since that week 1 game against Ohio State. That's when I'll start changing draft projection grades. That's when I'll start changing my rankings a little bit, when I have a little bit more data. If we take this to the running backs, only 2 running backs I want to talk about. First one is Bryson Washington, 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. We've talked about it. This is a very down running back class coming off of what 2025 was, which was an unbelievable rookie class. So besides Jeremiah Love, there is no order in which these guys are going to, like right now, we can look at it and say this guy's going to be second running back or third running back, or this guy's going to be top 50, or this guy's going to be top 100. I feel pretty confident saying the tools of Jeremiah Love puts him in the top 50 consideration. But everybody else after that, maybe we see 1 or 2 more guys push into the top 100. Maybe it's a year we see one guy go in the top 100 and everybody else is day 3. I think that very well could be the case. But Bryson Washington is one of those interesting players. He was in my top 10 running backs for the college football season. 115 yards, like I said, and 2 touchdowns. Looked quick. Liked what I saw from him this week. And then Justice Hayes now from Michigan, putting together 2 good games in a row. 125 yards and a touchdown. It's going to be guys building that momentum throughout the season. Stacking good games on top of good games is going to be what gets attention from the draft Twitter world in terms of the running back evals. The league is very much a traits-based thing, so I'm not going to ride up and down with just statistics. Anybody who's been a long-time listener knows that to me, college metrics and statistics, it doesn't mean a lot for me in terms of my evaluation process. For me, it's trying to take the traits that I see and translate it to the NFL. I think that's how the NFL works. I don't think the NFL cares much about statistics, but I do think it puts people on the radar more for like the draft Twitter people when they start stacking good games on top of each other. If we take this to the pass catchers, the lone tight end I want to talk about this week is Jack Andres of Texas. 2 catches, 52 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Arch Manning this week. Andres, the transfer, had a really good statistical year last year. Now this year, 2 touchdowns this week. He looks like one of those guys who's probably not going to be a top round 1 or round 2 pick, but maybe somewhere in round 3, round 4, a really just solid all-around tight end, good pass catcher, good red zone weapon. is got the size and frame that he can at least be functional at times in the blocking game. So Andres is an interesting player. So when a tight end scores 2 touchdowns, we don't see a ton of production from the college tight ends unless it's a guy that's more wide receiver-esque. So Andres, 2 touchdowns this week. I do think he's going to be one of the top tight ends in the country. So it's nice to see him find the end zone twice this week. And then if we talk about some wide receivers, I told you I'm going to be constantly checking in on Chris Bell. To me, he's one of the more interesting players in terms of the wide receiver position. I told you Dave Brugler had him as his number 2 wide receiver. I had him as number 7 entering the season. So Chris Bell this week, 4 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown. He's going to be constantly checking in on him because he checks the size, he checks the frame, he checks the athleticism. He's an alpha outside X wide receiver. We know how much in demand those are at the next level. So Chris Bell is going to be a guy that can he ride that momentum of a lot of upside and a lot of intrigue in the preseason there before the college football season took off. Can Bell continue to elevate his game to be a top 50 type prospect in the 2026 NFL draft? I talked about Mendoza looking good for Indiana in their blowout victory. Elijah Sarrett, 97 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's his guy. Sarrett should put up a monster season this year as well. I don't know how much I love his game translating. I do have some separation concerns at the next level, but he's a guy who I think could easily find his way into the round 3 or round 4 mix, and with a really great year, maybe even push his way into the round 2 mix. Eugene Wilson out of Florida, 7 catches, 60 yards, and 1 touchdown. Stunned that Florida went down with the upset. But Eugene Wilson is a big-time wide receiver prospect. He's a major recruit. A lot of it physical traits that are high-end. So it's nice to see Wilson getting off to a hot start this year for the Gators. Barian Brown formerly of Kentucky, now of LSU. You don't see him on a lot of rankings, but he's a guy who I'd done a deep dive last year because he was in like the 15 to 20 range of my rankings for the 2025 NFL draft before last season started. But 8 catches, 94 yards, and they gave him a rush as well. So Barian Brown, kind of forgot him, but once upon a time, he was a intriguing Devy asset. It's nice to see him really getting going this year for LSU. Could he all of a sudden see his draft stock start to move back up because he is an explosive player as well? His teammate, Nick Anderson, not a gaudy stat line, 3 catches, 17 yards, but he did find the end zone. That was their big 2 recruits in the portal, I should say, or transfer students. They brought in Barian Brown. They brought in Nick Anderson to really keep the pass game elevated there with a strong transfer crop of wide receivers. Last week, we talked about Jordan Tyson. This week, once again, 6 catches, 68 yards, and a touchdown. We talk about Sam Levitt really struggling, but every week I think we're just going to talk about he's just going to keep solidifying himself as the number 1 wide receiver in the country. And I think it's one of those things where I find a very hard scenario to not picture him being the first wide receiver taken in the 2026 NFL draft. Unless he tests really poorly, I do think people will look at Jordan Tyson and look at him similarly to what they thought of Tet McMillan, a smooth mover, can win vertically, can play that X position. A lot to like about Jordan Tyson. And then Deion Burks once again this week for Oklahoma, and that was in that game against Michigan. 7 catches, 101 yards, and 1 touchdown. I think teams are going to be really intrigued with the explosive slot wide receiver. You could do a lot of stuff with. I don't think this is a deep draft class in terms of skill players. So a guy like Deion Burks, who could be an explosive slot player, I think you'll see him ticketed somewhere in round 3 for that big playability that he could offer from inside at the slot. So there it is for this week. Like I said, it was a very ho-hum week in terms of matchups, in terms of things I was really looking at. Those were the things that kind of stood out the most for me for this week. Next, if we take this now to the NFL rookie report for week 1 of the NFL season, let's start the quarterback position. Only guy that we got to talk about is Cam Ward. Really struggled in his opening debut against Denver, even though Tennessee kind of kept it close. Ward was 12 of 28, 112 yards, took 6 sacks. We knew it wasn't going to be a good week 1. Tennessee still got a lot of, surrounding him to do, especially in the weapons department. They tried to fortify that O-line, but going to Denver is always a tough place. Denver's got arguably the best defense in the NFL. Week 1, the place was electric. Inevitable that Ward had his struggles in week 1. Be interesting to kind of see how he bounces back. The only other rookie quarterback I kind of wanted to talk about is it's almost Jackson Dart time already, which is kind of crazy to think after 1 week. They did announce today that Russell Wilson will get the start in Dallas. To be honest with you, if he struggles in the first half of this game and the game is kind of close, I could see them putting in Dart in the second half to try to jumpstart this offense. If not, second half, if they lose this game convincingly and Wilson struggles again and the offense struggles again to put points on the board, I think he will be starting in the home opener against the Kansas City Chiefs the following week. Next up, let's take this to the running backs. A lot of running backs to talk about. We knew it was an explosive class. Let's start at the top. Ashton Jeanty found the pylon, but a very, very lackluster week one for the highly touted prospect. Jeanty had 19 carries for 38 yards. We know they want to make him a bell cow. It's just a matter of when, not if, we're going to start seeing some gaudy production from Ashton Jeanty. RJ Harvey only had 6 carries, but he had an explosive 50-yarder, 70 total yards. We know he's going to be that big play threat, but we got to start seeing him at least handle 12 to 13 touches a week. He should be getting at least 10 rushes and then somewhere between 3 and 4 catches. If he can get to that 13, 14 touches, we're talking about a guy who's going to be very fantasy viable because he's got a lot of juice to be a big play waiting to happen. Omarion Hampton on last Friday night in that Chiefs-Chargers game couldn't really get much going on the ground. 15 carries, 48 yards. Obviously, they're hurting a little bit on the offensive line. Obviously, Joe Alt's still there, but losing one of the premier offensive tackles in football will hurt the run game a little bit. I think there will be better days for Omarion Hampton moving forward for sure. Travion Henderson had 6 catches for only 24 yards. Couldn't make anything big happen after the catch. He only had 5 carries for 27 yards. Just like RJ Harvey, I think that's got to change for Travion Henderson. Travion Henderson needs to get somewhere between 9 and 12 rushes a game and then 3 to 5 catches. He's got to be a 14, 15 touch player almost right off the bat. The Patriots need his big playability. You can get him the ball in a variety of ways. He's a great pass protector, so he can be down on third. He can be on the field on third down. They got to make sure to get him touches in space. They got to make sure to get him the ball in the ground game and coming out of the backfield. Another very highly touted rookie coming out was Caleb Johnson. He is buried on the Pittsburgh depth chart right now. He only had 1 carry, barely saw the football field. The fact that he's not playing over Kent Gainwell is almost startling, and it makes you wonder what they're seeing in practice for a guy who put up that level of production in college. Now, I know he fell to the 3rd round, but a lot of people, including myself, thought maybe he fell out of the 2nd round because it was such a deep running back class and he was more limited to more of a zone style offense. But it is a little bit of a damning report to see him playing behind Kent Gainwell and not immediately a part of that backfield, getting 6 to 10 carries at least, and then eating into Jaylen Warren. I was not expecting this much Kent Gainwell in week 1. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Chris Rodriguez was inactive. That's where Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt be the focal point of that ground game mixed in with Austin Eckler. 10 carries, 82 yards, and a touchdown. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt stock way up on him moving forward. Bashal Tuden, 3 carries, 11 yards. The one thing that did come out of that game is it looks like Tank Bigsby is not going to be very involved right now. I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded somewhat soon. But Tuden would be that guy behind Travis Etienne, and then obviously I think eventually slowly eating into him as well. Cam Scatterbu, who missed most of training camp and who missed most of preseason and part of training camp with an injury, played limited snaps for the Giants, had 2 catches for 12 yards. I think he's going to slowly start working in a little bit to Tyron Tracy, and it'll be more of a 50-50 committee down the line. So those were the running backs. Jaden Blue was a surprise inactive for Dallas. I don't know if that was more injury related, but I do think they need his big play ability in space and his pass catching ability. So I would expect him to kind of get an opportunity sooner rather than later there behind Javonte Williams. If we take this to the pass catchers, start with the tight ends. Tyler Warren lived up to everything we expected. 7 catches for 76 yards. They got him a rush as well. Indianapolis rolled in that game. If that game was more competitive, I could have seen Tyler Warren getting even more touches, more maybe another rush, definitely more targets and more opportunities. He could have caught 9 or 10 passes possibly for 100 yards if that was a close game. And then a surprise of the week, Harold Fannin for the Browns. We know the production he put up in college, but we also know he was drafted to a team that has a really great starting tight end in David Njoku. But they used Harold Fannin in a variety of ways. He had 7 catches for 63 yards and really was involved there. That's a good sign if he's already that involved in week 1 of the NFL season. If we take this to the wide receivers, Tet McMillan for Carolina, 5 catches for 68 yards. Carolina's offense was just stuck in the mud the entire day. But McMillan had 5 catches for 68 yards. It's clear he's going to be the focal point. I think we're going to see a lot of like 7 catches, 75, 80-yard weeks for Tet McMillan, which is already a solid week. And then if he finds the end zone, we're talking about great performances week in and week out from Tet McMillan as he tries to help that Carolina pass offense. Travis Hunter played, I believe it was 30 snaps on offense, all lined up inside the slot, 29 of 30. He was their slot wide receiver. They mostly come out of 3 wide receiver sets, so that's not a big deal. 6 catches for 30 yards, couldn't get anything down the field, couldn't make anything happen after the catch, but it was nice to see him pretty much be a full-time offensive player and only used sparingly on the defensive side of football. Obviously, the lead here when talking about the wide receivers with Emeka Egbuka, 4 catches, 67 yards, 2 touchdowns, including the game winner. He is just going to put up a monster season, especially until Chris Godwin gets back. No Jalen McMillan for a long time. So it's Mike Evans and it's Egbuka as the focal point of that passing offense. And we said it all last year. There's not one great trait of Egbuka, but he's just good to very good at everything. And it makes him a very complete wide receiver, very smooth, good route runner. We're going to see instant production, I think, all year from Egbuka. Matthew Golden for the Packers, we thought maybe he was going to get an opportunity to be the lead guy. Didn't get off to a great start. 2 catches, 16 yards there for Matthew Golden. Green Bay kind of rolled in that game over the Lions. Isaac Tesla only had 1 catch, 13 yards, but it was this phenomenal one-handed catch for a touchdown. You just see him oozing the potential and upside. But when you look at that team, they have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They just signed Jameson Williams to a long-term extension. They have Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield. They have Sam Laporta. So as good as Tesla looks, it's hard to envision a scenario anytime soon where he's more than the 5th option, which does hinder his fantasy viability. But some guys who are just talented enough eventually just push their way into the mix. That's kind of what Tesla's going to have to do if he wants to be viable there in Detroit. And then just circling back to the running backs, I missed out on talking about Dylan Sampson. He had 8 catches for 64 yards and 12 carries for 29 yards. I know the rushing production wasn't much, but Dylan Sampson had 20 touches this past week. Now, I'm sure over time that's going to change. Quinshon Judkins, now signed the contract. We'll see about if there's any future suspension. Not sure. But Dylan Sampson was a guy I really liked in college a lot. I thought he was one of those guys who could be a really good pass catching back. Obviously, Cleveland looks at that and agrees with that when you get him 8 catches for 64 yards. So there it is, guys, the NFL rookie report for week 1 of the college football season. Week 1 of the NFL season. We will be checking in on those rookies throughout the NFL season each week, talking about some of the rookie performances, whether good, bad, or indifferent, but just talking about things that, checking in on these rookies. We do so much analysis on them during last year's college football season, months and months pre-draft stuff, months and months post-draft stuff, that it's just only fair to kind of keep checking in on those guys to see how they're transitioning from the Saturday game to the Sunday game. Let's conclude the episode with a quick Dynasty fantasy stock report, talking about some things that we saw from week 1 of the NFL season, not rookie related in terms of values changing. Let's start at the quarterback position. 2 quarterbacks stock up, 1 quarterback stock down. Let's start with the stock down because I kind of mentioned it before. The Carolina pass offense could not get anything going. And all the concerns that Bryce Young looked prior to a stretch at the end of last year where he looked a lot better, they were on full effect again. I still look at Bryce Young and I don't see a guy who's ever going to live up to the upside of what I thought he would be coming out and what some people thought. And again, we talked about it. He didn't have these high-end physical traits. A lot of people compared him to a guy like Drew Brees. But the thing about Drew Brees is an extreme outlier. Drew Brees is one of the best quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL. But that is not the norm to have the physical traits of someone like that. And to be honest with you, Bryce Young doesn't even have the physical traits that Drew Brees had. I think Drew Brees had a bigger arm. I think Drew Brees was a little bit more mobile inside the pocket. So right now, I look at Bryce Young, and I know he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft just 2 years ago, but I still think he's a guy that, low QB2, I think might be his ceiling for fantasy. If somebody still thinks he's a little bit higher than that, I would be willing to get out. Stock up, Justin Herbert looked unbelievable for the Chargers. We know he's got all world physical traits. I think we might see Justin Herbert's best season this year. He's got Keenan Allen back. We know Ladd McConkey's a stud. We're interested to see if we get anything out of Lambert Smith or Trey Harris, the other rookies they have. Justin Fields, that was the most free and carefree I've seen Justin Fields in the NFL in terms of running and passing. He looked accurate on his passes. I know that's always been the issue with him. And I said I had a lot of concerns about Justin Fields and whether or not he just could. Now, it's 1 week, but it was against the Steelers, and that was as good as Justin Fields has ever looked as a passer. If the Jets find a way to get this out of him, combined with his rushing capability, we're talking about a guy who's not going to be a one-year starter, which is the only reason I was a little down on him when I did my Dynasty rankings. If he's a guy who gets another lucrative contract from the Jets as a starter, then this is massive stock up. Because when Justin Fields is locked in as a starter, he is a QB1. The concern in Dynasty rankings was, would he be able to hold on to that job? Would he be able to keep that job? Would this be his last chance as a starter? And if it didn't go well, he wouldn't. Now, listen, it's 1 week. And if the Jets struggle all year, they might invest in a quarterback. But if he looks as good as he did this past week and the Jets win some football games, Justin Fields is going to get a real opportunity to sign a contract to stay there as the Jets quarterback. And if that ever happens, we're talking major stock up because we know the capabilities he has in terms of the fantasy game. If we take this to the running backs, let's start with the stock down. Isaiah Pacheco. I was very concerned about Isaiah Pacheco. I know in my Dynasty leagues, I got out in 2, still have him in 1. If I get an opportunity somewhere over the next couple of weeks to sell on him, if he has a really good performance, I'm going to get out. He doesn't have a contract past this year. I don't think another team would look at him as a clear starting running back. And I think it's starting to be obvious that the Chiefs might not view him as a clear lead guy. They used a lot of Kareem Hunt. They used some Brashard Smith. So right now, Isaiah Pacheco is more of an early down player. I don't think you're going to see much in the pass game from him. So I think stock down on Isaiah Pacheco. Doesn't have a contract signed past this year. And if he leaves Kansas City, it's very possible he just morphs into a lesser part of a committee somewhere or a clear backup to another starting running back. So stock down on Isaiah Pacheco, stock up on Breece Hall. He looked explosive. I know they're giving a lot of touches to Braylon Allen. They're mixing in Isaiah Davis, but Breece Hall looked like that big-time player. If Breece Hall is not on the Jets a year from now, I have no worries that he would be the lead guy on another team and be a focal point of a ground game. And I love the talent. I would still be all in on Breece Hall. Stock up on Jaylen Warren. He signed the contract extension, so I think he's going to be in Pittsburgh for another few years. And then more importantly, it doesn't look like Caleb Johnson's going to eat into any of his work. I was surprised Ken Gainwell did, but I still think Warren is locked in as a really solid RB3 flex type. And I think there's more job security now for him than there was just a week or 2 ago. At the wide receiver position, keep the Jets theme going. If Justin Fields is going to play like he did, everybody's been way down on Garrett Wilson. A year ago, he was probably in most people's overall top 8, top 10 dynasty wide receivers. You don't see him there in many rankings right now, but I don't think that was more, on the Jets and the surrounding environment than the player himself. We know what kind of talent he has. We saw it this week. I think he's in for a major year. Even if Fields battles consistency issues in terms of his passing, he's going to be the clear focal point of that passing game. He's going to be force-fed looks, force-fed targets. He's going to be the one that drives that Jets engine in terms of the passing game. So I think Gary Wilson's set up for a big year. Stock down. Unfortunately, Xavier Worthy gets hurt. It's a shoulder thing. That could really linger. It could be season ending. We don't know yet. Sounds like he's going to try to play through it after a couple weeks, but that could impact his whole season. So if that's the case, definitely a little bit of a stock down. I thought these first 6 weeks were really going to give Worthy a chance to really ascend as one of the clear focal points of that offense with Rashee Rice suspended. Now most of that time could be missed from Worthy as well. Stock down on the 2 Dolphins receivers. Tua should have been on my stock down too, but I'll tie him in here. Tua, Waddle, Hill, it's hard to not think stock down on all of them. That whole Miami offense, we knew Tyreek Hill was probably not there for the long haul. I still think he could be a member of the Chiefs. I think that would make the most sense, especially if Worthy's out the year. I think the Chiefs should be on the phone with the Dolphins saying, what is it going to take to get Tyreek Hill back to the Chiefs? The Chiefs could use him. They are desperate for wide receiver help. He probably would be happy there. I think Mahomes would be able to keep Tyreek Hill happy, and the Reid has a relationship with him already. That makes a lot of sense. But right now in Miami, it's hard not to say stock way down on Tyreek Hill. And as much as I was buying Jalen Waddle in the offseason and wanted him in redraft as much as possible, right now the whole Miami Dolphins team looks broken. And right now, I think that all those players could really suffer the consequences from that. And then at the tight end position, I'm going to say stock up on Dalton Kincaid. He looked really good last night for the Bills in that amazing game between the Bills and the Ravens. Bills coming back and winning it. But Dalton Kincaid, I know he battled a lot of injuries last year, but he looked really good last night. I still think there's a lot of upside there. It wasn't too long ago. This guy was looked at as a top 5 Dynasty asset. I talked about this on the Dynasty Rankings tight end show. Right now, he was like in that like 10 to 12 range. He could easily catapult himself back into the top 5 or top 6 mix if he becomes one of the focal points of that Bills offense. I think week 1 really set him up to be an integral part of that Bills offense. So I will say stock up on Dalton Kincaid. So there it is, the Dynasty Fantasy Stock Report for week 1 of the NFL season, the NFL Rookie Report for week 1 of the NFL season, and the 2026 NFL Draft Report for week 2. If you are enjoying this content, please get over to the website, S2S Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. Check out the premium content tab for $9.99. And you can look at all of what we offer from the premium notebooks. Now is the best time to purchase it, so you have access to it throughout this college football season. You see all my changes in real time. You can open it up on the weekend where you're watching college football. You can see my rankings in the rankings notebook, all my scouting reports right now in the scouting notebook, and then the draft projections notebook that comes out next April. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. So, week 2 of that college football season in the books. I'm going to go enjoy Monday Night Football and conclude week 1 of the NFL season. And I look forward next week taking you from Saturday to Sunday.